And we are back, folks, really quickly to take you through the last session of the day. We've had an amazing set of sessions and activities on day one, and we want to end this day on a high, of course. And for that, we have three amazing guests with us for this session. This session is about page builders and forms, by the way. And if you have both of them on your website and you're struggling with page speed and performance, this session is definitely for you. So I would like to call upon stage the three awesome guests that we have, starting off with Miriam Schwab, who is the head of WordPress at Elementor. Of course, a lot of you may already know her from different WordCamps and events. Uh, so she's here. Along with her, we have Rohital, who is also from Elementor. He's the product marketing manager at Elementor, leading the platform's engineering vision. He's focused on building scalable tools that power millions of WordPress websites. And then finally, we have Matt Medeiros, who is a WordPress entrepreneur, a long-time podcaster known for the Matt Report. So if you are a watcher of that podcast, this is the brains behind that. Now, part of the team at Gravity Forms, focusing on product, community, and growth. So thank you all for joining me in this panel discussion around page builders and forms. Without any further delay and ado, I would like to dive into the first question of the session, which is from Miriam. Sorry to put you on the spot, Miriam, right away, but I want to ask this question first from you, is because I think a lot of people in our audience already use Elementor. They already definitely obviously know about Elementor, and there is a myth, or I would say there is a conception or a misconception in the community or in the industry that page builders, they're bulky, right? So they sort of drag your website to poor performance results. So my question is around that. So Elementor powers millions of sites, as you all know. Are page builders inherently at a performance disadvantage compared to custom coded themes?
So I think that this perception that page builders in general and Elementor specifically have performance issues is kind of a legacy perception. Unfortunately, once like a product has an issue of some kind, it's very hard to make people realize that has been improved. So Elementor was always a product that could be performant, but in the past, it was much harder. It did have more challenges around performance. And so our team prioritized performance over the last few years, performance improvements. And in almost every release, particularly for a certain amount of time, there were performance improvements in each release. And those changes were visible and noticeable in analytics and results and scoring to the point where you will have people who will still say, my Elementor site is slow, but then you'll have other people who will show examples of sites that are getting very high 90, 100 scores in terms of performance. And in the end, like a lot of tools in the WordPress space, it's a matter of how you build with it and the decisions that you make in the beginning and along the way. I mean, it's even possible that you'll build an Elementor site and, from you launch it and it's performant, but then if you start, adding more plugins or let's say making easier decisions that are like good in the short term along the way in terms of like your design systems and things like that, or nested elements, but then you'll end up, they kind of like add on to each other and then you might end up paying a price. So it's important not only to make good decisions when you're launching the site, but also along the way. But Elementor in and of itself, out of the box, is a performant product. And, we hope that people experience that. But if they're not, then there are ways to improve it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also like Roy to sort of weigh in on this question, because obviously you have been working with Elementor for a long time as well. And I would like your opinion on this as well, on this misconception or this myth that, Elementor or any other page builder for that matter has this nature, has this sort of feature or this characteristic that it sort of makes your website sluggish.
Yeah, look, I really connect with what Miriam said about like making good decisions. at the end of the day, there's always going to be a payoff to the more features you add and the more elements you add and the more complex you make your website. And these days, we all want to have super complex and fully animated and integrated websites because that's what the industry kind of demands. But there's always going to be a trade-off. And I think as web creators, it's not enough to just build whatever you want and expect it to work. We have to be like responsible, and we have to have like the integrity to know what we're building and what effect it has on our code and our performance as well. And I think in general, page builders today and Elementors, like specifically, we're working on making the core of the product as lean as possible and as light as possible, so you can have the possibility to go ahead and like make your dreams come true and add a lot of like complex features and pop-ups and a bigger plugin stack. But I do also feel like it's a kind of misconception, like WordPress is an old product. Elementor even is 10 years old, but a lot has happened around those years, and I think people are starting to experience this as well, and people are also starting to be more responsible and knowledgeable about how they're actually building their websites.
Awesome. My next question is from you, Matt. It's regarding forms, and forms are often the most interactive part of the site. We all know that. From your own perspective at Gravity Forms, what typically makes forms slower?
Sure. So, I think the subtitle of this talk is going to be "It Depends" across page builders and forms. But Gravity Forms, just like Elementor, we have a large user base. We've been around for a while. One of the first premium plugins to hit the WordPress commercial market. And a typical contact form, not that bad. It's not going to introduce a lot of load to the WordPress website or to the page itself. It's not loading in any scripts or third-party add-ons, etc. When you start building out a Gravity form or really complex Gravity form, if you start adding a lot of the sort of like CAPTCHA fields or Cloudflare turnstile stuff, you start adding in third-party connections with conditional logic to, sending form data to other sites. It's going to load those scripts in the back end. The good news is we spend a lot of time, working with our code and working with WordPress, working with great partners like Elementor to make sure that Gravity Forms is as performant as possible across the board. We do get a lot of great scores. I know I'm biased, but we get a lot of great scores on performance that we've worked with the teams over at WordPress.org, and it's always on the top of our mind, right? Whenever we're adding a new feature, creating a new add-on, it's always about making sure that this is going to be as performant as possible. Gravity Forms has, 10, 12, 13, 14 years of customer base, and we are as backwards and compatible as possible. So that means that sometimes we can't switch to the fastest, greatest, latest thing. But we are always looking to make sure that our customers are happy and that we're putting performance in the forefront. So I haven't seen a form yet at my 3 years being at Gravity Forms that has really stumbled the team, and they haven't been able to figure out how to make it performant. I ran an agency for 10 years using Gravity Forms. I was never really able to slow anything down. But being as accurate and as efficient as possible on building your form is always going to be the best bet to keep things as fast as possible.
Awesome. My next question is from all three of you, by the way, but I would like Roy to sort of start off answering on that question. So marketers love adding pop-ups, trackers, personalization, A/B testing. They love all that stuff to have on their website. At what point does marketing optimization starts hurting performance optimization? Like, at what point does a website owner realize that I've added, like, I've done too much? So what is that point that people need to be wary of?
That's a great question, because I myself sometimes ask that myself when I'm working like on our optimizations. And I think for me, it's really first of all, like I said before, there's always a trade-off, but for me, it's really about balancing the business needs and the marketing needs that I have with the performance, because similar to what I said earlier, like every capability you add, if it's you said pop-ups and personalization and A/B test and all these stuffs, they always add more weight, and it always comes with a certain performance cost. So it really becomes the question of how you balance these needs with the basic structure and design of your site, and keeping everything fast and a good experience for your visitors as well. And yeah, even myself, when I'm working on a new page for Elementor.com, and I have like a crazy idea for our dev team for this like big functionality or like a huge animation, I always have to consider also the performance trade-off, because I always want the website to be as fast as possible. We don't want users to have friction. We don't want them to bounce out. But having said that, in general, when like the basic underlying foundation in code is lean, like we're doing with version 4, and I'd love to like kind of expand about that a bit later. The core is already optimized, so the more tools you add, and the more plugins you add, and the more integrations and experiments you add, in order to drive growth, the site should still have like the basic structural efficiency, so that the performance shouldn't hurt or shouldn't collapse. So basically, like in short, there's always going to be a trade-off, but when you're working with the smart core and stack that's lean as possible, then you should experience good results in general.
Awesome. Matt, do you want to add up on that?
Yeah, and for if you're adding tracking scripts, Facebook pixels, like whatever sort of marketing / e-commerce load you might be putting on the site, of course, it's, for me anyway, it's just talking to your key stakeholders, like should we be tracking? Oftentimes what'll happen is people just start adding stuff, they forget they've added it. They've added some heat tracking pixel from 10 years ago and it's still running on the site. Constantly doing an audit. This is more of a human thing than a performance thing, but it's constantly doing an audit, making sure that your team is using the tool that somebody added from some department many years ago, and what's actually needed, for the business, to which it starts to impact, site load speed and user accessibility and stuff like that. So having those, clear discussions with the team and stakeholders. What do we need? What do we don't need? And what can we prune from this site moving forward?
Awesome. I would like to point out, Roy, that you mentioned V4. Someone in the comments already mentioned that V4 makes it better. Elementor upload is a myth, obviously, according to them, and V4 makes it even better. Miriam, do you want to add any last words on this question?
Sorry.
It's okay to say pass.
You can just say pass. Yeah, Matt. Exactly.
You know what? Okay, I will say one thing. So there's two aspects to converting users on your site, right? If you have marketing pop-ups and marketing optimizations, your goal is to take the traffic that has come to your site and have them do something, fill out a form or whatever it is. Let's say it's fill out a form. Let's say it's fill out a gravity form, of course. So that's what you want them to do. But you want to make sure that your funnel, the traffic that's coming to your site, is as optimized as possible as well. You want it to be the maximum number of visitors coming to your site. And we have seen very closely how performance can impact negatively or positively that funnel that's coming to your site, the traffic that's coming to your site. So it is important to keep an eye on these last leg type of marketing optimizations where you're trying to convert the user, and to see if it has some kind of negative impact on your performance. Because if it does, yeah, maybe that's a really great conversion optimization technique. But if your traffic is being reduced as a result, then you're paying a price. So it's always finding that balance between making sure, and by the way, especially if you're doing paid ad spend, then performance really plays a role. So it's about always having that balance of making sure that your site is performance, so you're getting the best results in terms of visitors coming and also benefiting and enjoying your site, right? If it's slow, they're out of there. And then also benefiting from that last leg of, okay, now fill my form, now get in touch, now buy my thing. So it's that balance. Okay, so I did have something to say.
Awesome. My next question is from you, Miriam, by the way. So you would want to continue talking. So my next question is around agencies, and I know a lot of agencies use Elementor, but where do you see agencies misusing Elementor in ways that create unnecessary performance debt?
So in general, the agencies that work with Elementor on an ongoing basis are pretty good at keeping Elementor performance because they can pump out a lot of sites, and I think they learn from that. So it comes kind of back to what I was saying, which is making short-term decisions that have long-term negative impact, like that you can see if an agency, for very legitimate reasons, needs to rush through a project or get it out faster and can't spend more time on it. Some decisions may be made there that could negatively impact performance. But in general, agencies often build their own kind of templated workflow, and I don't mean like website templates. I mean like they work in a particular way, and we see a lot of professionalism in the agencies working with Elementor, like the ones who are churning out like $5 websites. Those might not be the most performant, but the ones who are like properly building projects for their clients, if they keep in mind, don't have too many nested elements, don't just throw plugins at your site because it's easier as much as possible. And by the way, in this era of AI, a lot of those plugins that were maybe bulking up your site and causing issues can now be replaced with code snippets. Elementor's Angie, for example, has an Angie code component where you can just use it in your site to create whatever it is that you need, and you don't necessarily have to keep installing plugins. We'll see a lot of that now in this era of AI. So like making long-term decisions where you can, and if the budget doesn't allow, then you do your best. We all know what it's like to work with clients. So, there's also some empathy there.
Awesome. I would like to divert this discussion towards forms now a bit. And I want to ask Matt around the performance impact that comes from conditional logic, multi-page forms, and real-time validation. Like how much performance impact comes from these sort of things?
Sure. So I actually looked up some previous support issues at Gravity Forms when I was looking at these questions. And I don't have one that just pinpoints like either one of these particular use cases, specifically like conditional logic. But most of this stuff is going to be a minimal impact if you're, even if you're building a moderate sort of sales lead gen form for your customer, or some kind of like state level intake form. We often have Gravity Forms being used at local governments for renewing driver license, applying for some kind of other license in the state, or property document retrieval system or something like that. And it's generally really good at performance. I did pull up a support ticket. Obviously, I'm not going to name names, but we had a customer that did complain about some slower load times in Gravity Forms when they had over 2,000 forms with 60 to 200 fields each. So we're talking about like the real upper end of like pushing Gravity Forms. And it was actually something where there was also some performance on the WordPress side that stalled this stuff out. So we don't really see any kind of real major impact on performance when you're using this stuff. What I can say is, if you're really getting in the weeds with trying to optimize for performance on large forms, yes, if you break it up into a multi-page form, then when the person's loading the page, it's going to limit the amount of elements in the DOM, so it's going to be more performant than had you not done that. The question becomes, is this great user experience for the end user? Like, do we need to break up this form into multi-pages for a very small percentage of performance increase? But if the answer is yes, we can still do this and it is going to help in performance, then yes, Gravity Forms has, those types of features that'll do that. Conditional logic, hiding fields, displaying fields, depending on what somebody's putting in, that helps with user experience, which we'll talk about at a later question. But I don't have anything that's going to say like you should definitely not do this in a form, because we just haven't seen the boundaries being pushed yet with Gravity Forms in the performance or impacting performance. So so far so good for the stuff that we have. And again, except when you get to maybe 2,000 forms with 200 questions each, things get to be a little different. But that's very rare case for WordPress sites.
Awesome. I want to mix up this discussion. I want to go back to Elementor, and my next question is from you, Roy. What has Elementor changed in recent years, specifically to address JavaScript execution time and DOM load?
Okay, I would love to. I would love to address this because actually we've been doing so much. I think, like like Miriam also mentioned, people tend to think that WordPress is slow and Elementor is slow, but actually we've been doing so much. I've been at the company for less than 2 years, and I've already been a part of many changes. So one thing we did in the last 2 years is just improving in general asset loading, which is something we always do. So making sure that our script and styles load conditionally only when they needed, rather than globally. So it's really part of conditional loading. We also did that with CSS. So CSS is also something that conditionally loads always on all Elementor sites, as well as element caching. It's a big improvement that we also shipped in I think it was in 2024, and generally just cleaning up markup, and so pages execute with less JavaScript and they render faster. And this was just what we did with version 3, but version 4 of our editor is where we take this even further. So I mentioned kind of version 4 before, and I saw that there were some comments about it. So Elementor has been in version 3 for 5 years, and now we're weeks away from shipping version 4.0, and it really introduces a new foundation based on like an atomic approach to design development. So you're really building design systems with variables, classes, components. And this also has a lot of performance advantages, actually major ones. So one thing we're very proud of is that all our new elements, our new widgets, are single div wrappers. So they're much leaner on the DOM structure, and they just have one single line of code instead of multiple nested containers that Elementor previously had. Conditional JavaScript is also in V4. So JavaScript is loaded conditionally only when the element actually exists on the page. Classes, which I mentioned earlier, this also has a very big performance advantage, because basically classes are global. So you set a style once, and then it applies to all the elements, but the class only loads one time, basically on your whole page, instead of styles loading locally for each individual element. And also interactions. That's kind of, I guess, the last big thing. So interactions are our new animations in V4, and they're much leaner, and they load conditionally as well in comparison to the V3 animations. So people who will transition to V4 are going to experience major performance benefits. And we hope that more and more people will start experiencing that very soon. We're now in beta, and actually in less than a month, it's already going to be officially available to everyone. And it's going to be a huge game changer for all our millions of sites out there.
Awesome. That's amazing to know, Roy. My next question is it's around forms because I asked Miriam about agencies and Elementor. Now I know for a fact that a lot of agencies use Gravity Forms as well. And my question for you, Matt, is that how should agencies think about form performance when optimizing for conversion rates? Because I know for a fact that conversion rates is a huge pain point for agencies. So how should agencies think about performance when it comes to that particular element?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's critical to the conversation when you're an agency. When you're talking to a client, you're looking at WordPress as a whole as the thing that works for your business. Beyond a contact form, and Gravity Forms has forever had a conversion percentage in the default view of Gravity Forms because it's been so core to our experience since we started the plugin. And you need to, one, sell the idea to your client. This is the part that makes your agency money beside the performance is, hey, this website is going to do more stuff for you. It's going to collect this data. It's going to collect sales information. And we're either going to process that here in WordPress and you'll have this dashboard of Gravity Forms and other reporting, or Gravity Forms acts as the central hub to send this data out for your business to do other things. Either feed your newsletter platform or feed your sales CRM platform, or Google Drive, Airtable, all the millions of integration. Well, not millions, but all of the integrations that we have for Gravity Forms, and help that business perform on a real business line perspective. To make the form performant, all the stuff we've already talked about, with using conditional logic to streamline the form. That is like the most underrated feature in my opinion, is setting up conditional logic for your form, so that the user isn't overwhelmed. This is an accessibility thing. This is a will the user finish the form before they get exhausted thing. Gravity Forms has some features for save and continue later, for saving the fields as they go along if they have to come back to finish things off. But keeping those forms as minimal for the user, but as maximal for your business is going to be the best step. And it's not a JavaScript and caching thing. This is how do we design this form to make sure that the user finishes it and we get, what we need. So that's how I would sort of frame like having that conversation with a client as an agency owner.
Awesome. My next question is from the Elementor Do over here. And it's very simple, very straightforward, very out there question. If someone wants a website, an Elementor's website, in fact, that loads under 2 seconds, what architectural decisions must be made before the design begins? Miriam, if you can start us off with that.
Well, okay. I think it comes down to a few things. One is keeping the plugins and additional widgets and all that kind of stuff that you're installing in your site to minimum. Considering which theme you might be using, if you're going to be using a theme. Hello theme is optimized for Elementor. So, it's probably a good choice. And as you go along, as you're building it, measure. Obviously, optimize your images. And I would recommend at this point using V4 as much as possible. When you install a new site, like on old sites, V4 isn't like automatically activated, but if you install and create a new Elementor site, then V4 is. And like Roy described, so you have a significantly reduced DOM, much cleaner code. It has an atomic approach. By the way, V4, you guys are seeing it now, and you might have heard like us talking about it, especially Roy in videos if you've seen him for, let's say, the last 6 months. But this is a project that's a huge undertaking for Elementor. We have a 10-year-old code base. And this is like a major refactor to bring Elementor into the present and into the future. This new architecture also sets Elementor up to be much more AI friendly due to the way that the structure is built. So use V4, embrace it. It's like a bit of a learning curve. It's a different way of doing things, but the results are more future-proof and more optimized. So highly recommend that.
Awesome. Roy, you want to add some things to it?
I think Miriam's words of wisdom said it all. Yeah, that's basically it. Be responsible about your stack and how you're building your sites. Use V4 as much as possible. The Hello theme, and yeah, we're seeing beautiful and fast websites out there that load quickly. So yes, it's possible.
Awesome. So, folks, we're moving towards the last few questions for this panel discussion. And I want to divert again this conversation towards forms. And a very straightforward question now from you, Matt, is what's the leanest possible high converting form setup for anyone, be it agencies or be it a developer, be it an e-commerce store? What is the leanest, most leanest possible high converting form setup?
The mail to link. No, just kidding. The highest possible converting form is, as I was mentioning before, it's just like the least amount of friction you can give the customer to get you the most amount of information you need to take action, whatever that is in your business. Again, I would lean heavily on the conditional logic to make sure that you're, pushing the customer to, not have to see the entire form, where it could exhaust them or stress them out as immediately as they see it. We also have a great third-party ecosystem, and Gravity Wiz makes a nested Gravity Forms add-on as well. So you can load other entire Gravity Forms in a form depending on the choice that happened above. So there's lots of ways to sort of craft that Gravity Form. Gravity Form also has a conversational, what we call conversational forms add-on, which takes it into that sort of full screen perspective too. So if you, the keyboard navigation, you only see one question at a time kind of thing. So if you really want to optimize for like a full screen takeover and you want to make sure that you're showing the user just the question that they need, the conversational form add-on is another great option. But I would lean on really thinking deeply about what you need from that customer. How am I going to make this as frictionless as possible, and leverage conditional logic to make stuff hide and appear when you need it.
Awesome. This brings us to the end of our conversation. But before I go away, there is a question in the comment section, and it's for the Elementor folks here, specifically addressing Miriam. It says it's from Nicholas, and it says that my fear with Elementor is currently Claude. I can spin an entire 1,000+ page website up in Claude code in one day. How is Elementor going to let me do this? Because remaking Claude websites in Elementor right now is a pain.
Yes. Very good question. So first of all, we're all navigating this new world of AI and trying to figure out what it means for all of us and the best way to ensure a strong future for WordPress and Elementor. So we have a few AI tools that we have created and have released. And so the ones I'm going to mention don't specifically answer that. Also, I'll just talk about them quickly. So we have, of course, like embedded AI in Elementor, the standard stuff. I'm going to talk about that. Then we have Angie, which is its own plugin, which is not dependent on Elementor or not specifically for Elementor. It's for WordPress in general. It gives people strong tooling for ongoing management, but also for development. So things that people may not have developed for their site until now because it was out of reach or expensive or needed particular developers, you can now do that. So it's free to try. It's in the repo. It's called Angie, A-N-G-I-E. People should check it out. With regards to spinning up the sites, so we have a product called Site Planner. It allows you to spin up a site, not 1,000 pages. That's a very unique use case. I don't know like what the need is to have 1,000 pages out of the gate, but let's say people are building a site for their business or for their blog or whatever. Site Planner can do a good job, but we're actually rebuilding that as well to bring greater design capabilities to that. So keep an eye on that. I will say that the way that we see AI, like Claude websites versus WordPress or Elementor, is that there's a few advantages that WordPress in general will still have, at least for the for the foreseeable future, which in AI can be like tomorrow, everything will change, right? But for now, first of all, WordPress is a very like battle tested architecture with a strong ecosystem around it. So if for day one of a website, Claude can be great. I built a site, I launched it, I'm happy with it. Day two, ongoing maintenance, ongoing management, ongoing content management. We think that WordPress will still be the winner there in terms of security, reliability, scalability. Also, websites, it depends how you're building the site with Claude, but you can have major SEO issues with React-based websites, which is what a lot of them are. And Nicholas, I know you're an expert in that. So I'm not sure what your experience is with that, but that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, so we hope to be able to answer that. I'm not sure if we'll meaning provide a solution for that type of need. Not sure about the 1,000-page website, although probably once we can, generate a beautifully designed 20-page website, we can also do 1,000 pages for whoever needs that. But stay tuned. We already have tooling for AI, which we recommend people try out. I think WordPress, because we're like a legacy ecosystem, people are used to doing things a certain way and are afraid to try. And so our message is dare to try. AI feels scary. AI feels like open-ended. It's like this black box of, I don't know what it can do for me. Dream big and just try it. Go into Angie, say, build me whatever it is that you want to build. A WooCommerce system to manage stock inventory. I don't know, pop-ups, conversion things, anything, crazy things, buttons that generate confetti. Go do it. You can seriously do all that. So anyways, we all will see. I think WordPress will come out strong and hopefully we can contribute to that. So good luck to all of us.
All right. This is it, folks. This is it from this session. And I would like to thank Matt, Miriam, and Roy for being here and being part of our guest speaker roster and being part of this panel discussion. Thank you so much. This has been extremely insightful. A lot of people, I think, got a lot of clarity on how they can improve performance of their websites where they're using Elementor or any other page builder or Gravity Forms or any other forms for that matter. So thank you so much to all three of you for being here in this session. And if you want, you can hang around in the comment section, discuss page building or or forms, because a lot of people do have some comments or concerns, not exactly questions, but comments around forms and Elementor and page builder. So feel free to do that. As for you folks, this is it for day one of the performance bootcamp or cloud bootcamp, as you would like to call it. We've had amazing day of insightful sessions and activities, starting off with Sabrina and then followed up with Amber, and then some amazing activities, some fun activities, and some engaging quizzes as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around and attending the sessions and being so engaging in the comments as well. As for all of you asking for the recordings, yes, the recordings of all the sessions will be available once the event is over in the scheduled section. So this is it for day one, but this is not it for the performance bootcamp, because we have another day of amazing sessions lined up for you tomorrow. We have people from Varnish, Cloudflare, GT Metrics all coming in tomorrow to educate you and enable you on performance and website speed. So make sure that you tune in tomorrow, same place, same time. See you all.